A parrot sits on a perch and watches you from across the room. You walk over and say hello. Without hesitation, it replies, hello. You laugh, it laughs. You ask, how are you? And somehow it answers, I'm good. Most people see this and think the mystery is solved. Parrots are excellent mimics. They're basically feathered tape recorders, repeating sounds they've heard before. But imagine something strange. What if one day your parrot suddenly looked at an empty hallway and quietly said, who's there? Not because someone taught it to say that at that moment, not because it heard a noise, just because it seemed to understand a situation. Would that change how you see it? For centuries, humans have treated language as the dividing line between us and every other animal on Earth. We build civilizations with words. We pass down ideas, tell stories, share knowledge, and create entire realities through language. And yet, sitting in living rooms around the world are birds capable of speaking our words with astonishing accuracy. The question is whether those words actually mean anything to them. Are parrots simply repeating sounds? Or could there be something happening behind those bright eyes that we've underestimated for far too long?
Most people believe they already know the answer. Parrots don't understand language. They copy it. And honestly, that seems reasonable. After all, humans can imitate sounds without understanding them too. Someone can sing a song in a language they've never spoken. A child can repeat complicated words without knowing their meaning. The common explanation is simple. Parrots possess extraordinary vocal learning abilities. Unlike dogs, cats, or most other animals, they can precisely imitate sounds from their environment. Human speech just happens to be one of those sounds. According to this view, when a parrot says good morning, it's no different from a phone playing a recorded message. The sounds come out, but there's no understanding behind them. And for a long time, scientists agreed. Language was considered uniquely human. Animals could communicate, certainly. Bees dance, dolphins whistle, wolves howl. But language, real language, that belonged to us. Case closed. Except there was one problem. Some parrots kept doing things that didn't fit the story. They weren't just repeating words. They seemed to be using them. And that's where things started getting uncomfortable.
In the late 20th century, a young scientist named Irene Pepperberg began asking a question many researchers considered ridiculous. What if parrots understood more than we thought? At the center of her research was an African gray parrot named Alex. At first glance, Alex looked like an ordinary bird. Gray feathers, red tail, sharp eyes, nothing about him suggested he would challenge decades of scientific assumptions. Pepperberg spent years teaching Alex through an unusual method. Instead of rewarding him for repeating sounds, she treated words as meaningful labels connected to real objects and concepts. Slowly, something remarkable began to emerge. Alex learned colors, shapes, numbers, materials. He could identify objects correctly. He could answer questions. He could distinguish between concepts like same and different. And perhaps most surprising of all, he sometimes appeared to combine what he knew to solve new problems he had never encountered before. Scientists watching the experiments became increasingly intrigued because if Alex was merely mimicking sounds, his performance didn't make much sense. A tape recorder doesn't understand categories. A recording doesn't know the difference between wood and metal, yet Alex often seemed to. Suddenly, the question wasn't whether parrots could talk. The question was whether they might actually comprehend.
But here's where it gets interesting. The more scientists studied parrots, the messier the story became. Yes, Alex produced astonishing results, but critics pointed out a possibility. Maybe he wasn't understanding language at all. Maybe he was simply becoming incredibly skilled at reading human cues. Humans are surprisingly easy to influence without realizing it. A tiny movement, a subtle facial expression, a slight change in tone. Animals can become experts at detecting signals we're not even aware we're giving. The problem is that this has happened before. In the early 1900s, a horse named Clever Hans appeared capable of solving mathematical problems. People were amazed. Until researchers discovered the horse wasn't doing math. He was reading unconscious signals from his audience. Could parents be doing something similar? Could their apparent understanding be an illusion? Suddenly, every breakthrough raised new doubts. Every answer generated more questions. And the deeper researchers looked, the harder certainty became. Because understanding language isn't a single skill. It's a collection of abilities: vocabulary, context, grammar, intention, meaning. The challenge wasn't proving parrots could do one of these things. The challenge was figuring out how many they could actually do.
And this is where things get strange, because the debate isn't really about parrots. It's about intelligence itself. Humans often imagine intelligence as a ladder. At the top sits humanity. Below us are increasingly simple animals.
But nature rarely works that way. Evolution doesn't build ladders, it builds solutions. Bird brains evolved differently from mammal brains. For years, scientists assumed this meant birds were less intelligent. Then researchers started discovering something unexpected. Crows could solve puzzles. Ravens could plan for the future. Some birds could recognize human faces years after seeing them. Others could use tools. Some even appeared capable of understanding basic cause and effect. Suddenly, the phrase bird brain wasn't sounding very scientific anymore. But that raises a bigger question. If intelligence can evolve in radically different forms, what exactly are we measuring when we say something understands? Does understanding require human-like thinking? Or is that just our own bias talking? Maybe we've spent centuries searching for tiny humans inside animal minds instead of appreciating entirely different kinds of intelligence.
Here's what we know. Language feels special because it's tied to consciousness. When someone speaks to you, you assume there's an inner experience behind the words. A mind, a perspective, a self. But why? The truth is that we never directly experience another mind, not even another human mind. We infer it. We assume other people are conscious because they behave in ways that resemble us. Now consider a parrot. If it uses words appropriately, if it asks questions, if it responds to situations, at what point do we begin attributing understanding? And where exactly is the line? The problem is that science can measure behavior. It can measure brain activity. It can measure performance. But subjective experience remains stubbornly private. No experiment can tell us what it feels like to be a parrot. This idea was famously explored by philosopher Thomas Nagel, who argued that every conscious creature may possess experiences fundamentally inaccessible to us. Maybe parrots understand words differently than humans. Maybe they don't understand them at all. Or maybe understanding itself exists on a spectrum rather than an all-or-nothing divide.
Scientists have approached this mystery from multiple angles. Some studies have shown parrots using labels consistently across different contexts, suggesting more than simple memorization. Others have demonstrated impressive problem-solving abilities that seem difficult to explain through mimicry alone. Researchers have also observed social learning in parrots. Young birds learn from older birds. They adapt, they innovate, they sometimes invent new sounds and behaviors. Meanwhile, neuroscience has revealed something surprising. Bird brains are organized differently from mammal brains, but different doesn't necessarily mean inferior. In some tasks, birds perform at levels comparable to primates. That discovery forced scientists to rethink assumptions that had dominated biology for generations. Then came observations from pet owners around the world, parrots appearing to use words spontaneously, calling specific people by name, requesting objects, expressing preferences, even seeming to comment on situations. Of course, anecdotal stories aren't scientific proof, but taken together, they create a pattern that's difficult to ignore. And every new discovery points toward the same unsettling possibility. Perhaps language isn't the unique human achievement we once imagined. Perhaps pieces of it evolved elsewhere too. Not completely, not identically, but enough to blur a boundary we once thought was absolute.
Near the end of Alex's life, something happened that continues to haunt people who study animal cognition. After years of working together, Irene Pepperberg prepared to leave the laboratory one evening. It wasn't unusual. It was part of their daily routine. But on that particular day, Alex looked at her and spoke words he had used before. Be good. Then he added something unexpected. I love you. Pepperberg replied as she always did. You'll be in tomorrow. And Alex responded with 3 simple words. You be good. Those were among the last things he ever said to her. The next day, Alex was gone. Now, skeptics can argue those words were learned phrases, and perhaps they were. But that's precisely what makes the story so powerful, because no one can say for certain what was happening inside Alex's mind at that moment. And that's the mystery that remains unsolved. Science tells us parrots can imitate speech. Science tells us they can learn associations. Science tells us they possess cognitive abilities far more sophisticated than we once believed. But science still cannot answer the deepest question. When a parrot speaks, is there meaning behind the sound? Or are we hearing our own expectations reflected back at us? Maybe one day we'll know. Or maybe some minds will always remain partially hidden from one another. After all, if we struggle to understand the consciousness of a creature living in the same world as us, breathing the same air, looking into our eyes every day, what does that say about how little we truly understand consciousness itself?